You trust your brain to protect you, but it's actually busy handing the keys of your life to anyone who knows how to ask. You move through the world under the comforting blanket of your own morality, believing that your kindness is a beacon and your empathy is a shield. You probably think your choices are yours, but your brain made most of them long before you noticed. Right now, as you listen to this, you might feel a sense of pride in being a good person, the kind who helps, who listens, who gives others the benefit of the doubt. But in the shadows of your subconscious, that very goodness is being mapped out as a vulnerability. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're watching from and what time your mind decided to question itself tonight. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's step quietly into the hidden architecture of the human mind. Consider the halo effect. It is one of the most well-documented cognitive biases in behavioral psychology, suggesting that if we perceive one positive trait in a person, such as physical attractiveness or a warm smile, our brains automatically attribute a host of other positive qualities to them, like honesty and intelligence. Because you strive to be a good person, you project that same internal framework onto others. You see a kind face, and your brain takes a cognitive shortcut, deciding that this person is safe. But this heuristic is a double-edged sword. While it saves mental energy, it creates a blind spot where manipulation can thrive. There is a surprising hidden behavior insight known as the Ben Franklin effect, which posits that we grow to like people more after we do a favor for them. For the good person, this creates a dangerous loop. You do a favor for someone who is subtly taking advantage of you, and instead of your brain signaling a warning, it justifies the action by increasing your affinity for the exploiter. You aren't being taken advantage of because you are weak. You are being taken advantage of because your brain is trying to maintain a consistent image of yourself as a helpful, virtuous individual. Psychologists still debate whether true altruism exists, or if every good deed is merely a sophisticated survival mechanism designed to increase social standing. Regardless of the origin, the reality is that your pro-social behavior acts as a predictable script. When you enter a room, your brain is looking for ways to harmonize, to connect, and to assist. But while you are looking for ways to be helpful, others are looking for the utility in your presence. Maybe this is happening to you right now. Perhaps you're replaying a conversation from earlier today where you said yes when every fiber of your intuition was screaming no. You ignored that intuition because your conscious mind was too busy maintaining the halo you've placed on the person asking for your time. The uncomfortable truth is that your brain is often more interested in social cohesion than in your personal protection. It values the we over the I, even when the we is a parasite. This invisible mental trap is set the moment you decide that being good means being compliant. You are operating on a System 1 level, fast, instinctive, and emotional, while the person taking advantage of you is likely operating in System 2, calculating, slow, and deliberate. They aren't just taking your time or your resources. They are hijacking your biological urge to be a valuable member of the tribe. The architecture of your kindness is built upon a foundation of ancient social contracts, many of which you never consciously signed. One of the most powerful of these is the rule of reciprocity. In mainstream psychology, the principle of reciprocity is recognized as a near-universal social norm, the internal pressure to repay what another person has provided us. It's what makes you feel a sudden, sharp pang of guilt if someone buys you a coffee when you didn't expect it. Your brain experiences this not as a gift, but as a debt, a psychological imbalance that must be corrected to maintain social equilibrium. However, there is a surprising hidden behavior insight that many miss. The repayment demanded by a manipulator is rarely proportional to the gift they gave. This is the foot in the door technique refined into an art form. Someone might offer you a small, unsolicited favor, a bit of praise, a minor piece of information, or a moment of perceived emotional vulnerability. Because you are a good person, your System 1 thinking immediately registers a debt. Later, when they ask for a significant sacrifice of your time, money, or integrity, the pressure to comply is overwhelming. You aren't being generous. You are performing a frantic mental accounting to erase a debt you never asked to incur. Psychologists still debate whether reciprocity is a hardwired biological imperative or a purely cultural construct. But for you, the effect is the same. The manipulator understands that for a person with high empathy, the feeling of owing someone is more painful than the act of being exploited. They weaponize your own integrity against you. When you feel that heavy, sinking sensation in your chest because you're about to say no to someone who helped you once, remember that false certainty from earlier, the certainty that you are in control of your boundaries. In that moment, your boundaries aren't yours. They belong to the person holding the ledger. This creates a psychological cage. You begin to monitor your own behavior through the lens of the other person's needs. If they are good enough to include you, you feel good enough to serve them. This is how hidden manipulation functions. It doesn't feel like a robbery. It feels like a transaction. You believe you are participating in a healthy exchange of social capital. But if you look closer at the books, you'll see you are the only one paying. Maybe this is happening to you right now in your professional life or your closest relationships. You find yourself going the extra mile for a colleague who once gave you a single compliment, or you're staying late to help a friend who occasionally listens to your problems. You justify it as being there for them, but your brain is actually caught in a loop of debt avoidance. The manipulator doesn't need to force you to act. They simply need to trigger your inherent sense of fairness. By the time you realize the exchange is one-sided, the habit of compliance has already been etched into your neural pathways. The dark irony of the human condition is that the more value you place on being fair, the easier it is for the unfair to find a home in your life. You are looking for a mirror of your own conscience in everyone you meet. But some people are not mirrors. They are black holes, absorbing every ounce of light you emit without ever reflecting a single ray back. You assume that by giving, you will eventually receive. But in the world of dark persuasion, your giving is merely seen as a successful extraction. Your brain is so busy trying to be a good debtor that it forgets to ask if the debt was ever legitimate in the first place. The architecture of your personality is not just a collection of traits. It is a map of potential entry points. In mainstream psychology, the Big Five model identifies agreeableness as a primary dimension of human character. If you score high here, you are compassionate, cooperative, and deeply invested in social harmony. But this trait, which you likely view as your greatest moral asset, functions in the world of dark persuasion as a bypass for your rational ego depletion boundaries. Every time you prioritize someone else's comfort over your own needs, you are spending a finite resource of willpower. The good person often finds themselves in a state of chronic mental fatigue, making them the perfect target for those who thrive on the exhaustion of others. A surprising hidden behavior insight lies in the concept of choice architecture. Manipulators often don't force you to do anything. They simply frame the environment so that the path of least resistance, the one that feels most kind, is the one that serves them. They present options where saying no feels like an act of aggression, and because your brain is wired to avoid social friction, you choose the path of compliance. You believe you are making a free choice to be helpful, but in reality, your environment has been rigged to exploit your natural aversion to conflict. You are not choosing to be a martyr. You are simply avoiding the perceived noise of a confrontation. Psychologists still debate whether personality traits like agreeableness are truly stable throughout a lifetime, or if they are merely a series of learned behaviors reinforced by social rewards. If you were praised as a child for being the easy one or the helper, your brain may have developed a dopamine response to self-sacrifice. This makes you vulnerable to dark personalities who can sense that your self-worth is tied to your utility. They don't have to threaten you, they just have to look disappointed. That subtle shift in their expression triggers a fear of abandonment or a sense of failure in you, causing you to overextend yourself to win back their approval. Maybe this is happening to you right now. Think about the people in your life who always seem to have a crisis that only you can solve. Observe the subtle way they describe their problems, making it seem like you are the only one who truly understands them. This is a form of ego stroking that lowers your defenses. By making you feel exceptional, they make it harder for you to set a boundary. To say no would be to lose your status as their savior. You are trapped in a role you didn't audition for, playing a part that requires you to give until you are empty. Recall the false certainty we discussed earlier, the idea that you know why you do what you do. In reality, your subconscious is often making decisions based on loss aversion. You aren't giving because you want to. You are giving because you are terrified of losing the image of yourself as a good person. The manipulator knows this. They don't attack your character. They threaten your self-perception. They make you feel that a good person would do this one small thing, then another, and another. Before you know it, your boundaries haven't just been crossed, they've been erased. The tragedy of the high agreeable individual is the belief that eventually your kindness will build a wall of protection around you. You think that if you are good enough, the world will be good back. But behavioral psychology suggests otherwise. In many social environments, the sucker is a necessary component of the ecosystem. Without your willingness to absorb the emotional and physical labor of others, the exploiters would have to face the consequences of their own actions. By being good, you are often inadvertently subsidizing the bad behavior of those around you. The most uncomfortable realization isn't that others lie to you, but that your own brain is a co-conspirator in your exploitation. When you are treated poorly by someone you have helped, a profound internal conflict arises. In mainstream psychology, this is known as cognitive dissonance, the mental distress experienced when holding two or more contradictory beliefs, ideas, or values. You believe you are a good person who makes wise choices, and you believe the person you are helping is worthy of your effort. When they take advantage of you, these two beliefs collide. To resolve the pain of this tension, your mind often takes the path of least resistance. It invents a justification for the exploiter. There is a surprising, hidden behavior insight known as the sunk cost fallacy applied to human relationships. Just as a gambler continues to pour money into a losing machine because they've already lost so much, you continue to give to a person who drains you because you have already invested so much emotional capital in them. To walk away now would be to admit that your previous investments were a waste. Your brain would rather maintain the illusion of a future payoff, a moment where they finally appreciate you, than face the ego-bruising reality that you were wrong about them. You aren't being loyal. You are being held hostage by your own past efforts. Psychologists still debate whether this tendency towards self-delusion is an evolutionary byproduct of our need for group stability, or if it's a failure of our modern executive function. Regardless, it explains why good people often become the fiercest defenders of their own abusers. You tell your friends they're just going through a hard time or they don't mean it. You are essentially gaslighting yourself to protect your internal narrative. Remember that false certainty from earlier, the idea that you are a rational actor. In these moments, you are a storyteller, weaving a fiction where your exploitation is actually a form of noble patience. Maybe this is happening to you right now. You might be making excuses for a partner who never reciprocates, or a boss who takes credit for your work. You tell yourself that if you just work a little harder, or if you're just a little more good, the dynamic will shift. But behavioral science suggests that by justifying their behavior, you are actually training them to continue it. You are providing what researchers call intermittent reinforcement, the most addictive form of conditioning. Because they are occasionally kind, you stay through the long stretches of manipulation, hoping for the next hit of validation. This internal manipulation is the most dangerous because it is invisible. It turns your conscience into a weapon used against your own well-being. You begin to feel that setting a boundary is an act of meanness, and because your identity is rooted in being good, you perceive your own self-preservation as a moral failing. The exploiter doesn't even need to be in the room anymore. Your own mind has taken over the task of keeping you in line. You have internalized the manipulator's voice until it sounds exactly like your own sense of duty. The mind is a master of protecting the ego at the expense of the truth. It is easier to believe that the world is a fair place where your kindness will eventually be rewarded than it is to accept that some people view your empathy as a resource to be mined until it is depleted. You are living in a psychological simulation where goodness is a shield, but in the cold light of reality, that shield is often made of glass. To break the cycle, you have to do something your brain is wired to avoid. You have to allow the dissonance to exist. You have to accept the painful truth that you are a good person to someone who didn't deserve it. We must eventually look at the cold, mathematical reality of your virtues. In the study of game theory, specifically the prisoner's dilemma, researchers look at how individuals cooperate or defect in social exchanges. A classic strategy is tit for tat. You start with cooperation, then mirror your opponent's previous move. But good people often fall into the trap of always cooperate. In a world of mixed strategies, always cooperate is the only profile guaranteed to be exploited until extinction. Your kindness, when disconnected from a feedback loop of mutual respect, becomes a biological error. You are essentially playing a game where you have signaled to everyone else that your defection price is infinite. A surprising hidden behavior insight is found in frequency-dependent selection. This biological concept suggests that in any population, a small percentage of cheaters can thrive as long as the majority are cooperators. If everyone were a predator, the system would collapse. But because you exist, because you are reliable, forgiving, and empathetic, you create a niche where a manipulator can survive without ever having to contribute. You are the host in a parasitic relationship that evolution has preserved for millennia. Your brain's urge to forgive is not just a moral choice. It is a programmed response that allows the social fabric to remain intact, even if it comes at your personal expense. Psychologists still debate whether cooperative and exploitative personalities are fixed genetic phenotypes, or if we all possess the capacity for both, depending on the environment. If the latter is true, then by never setting consequences, you are actually inviting the shadow side of others to emerge. You aren't just a victim of their nature. You are a primary factor in their environment. When you refuse to hold someone accountable, you are providing the unconditional positive regard that allows their manipulation to flourish unchallenged. Remember the false certainty of your own victimhood? The truth is that by staying silent, you are an active participant in the game theory of your own martyrdom. Maybe this is happening to you right now, that quiet realization that by being nice, you have actually been enabling. You have been rewarding the very behavior that causes you pain. To change this, you must rewire your internal social contract. You must accept that a boundary is not a wall to keep people out, but a gate to keep your own integrity in. You must learn the tit-for-tat of the soul, being willing to withdraw your light when it is being used to illuminate someone else's darkness at the cost of your own. As we move toward the end of this journey, take a moment to breathe. The weight of these realizations can be heavy, but there is a strange freedom in seeing the machinery. You are starting to see that your goodness doesn't have to be a blind reflex. It can be a conscious, guarded treasure. The architecture of your mind is complex, filled with halls of mirrors and trap doors, but you are the one walking through them. You don't have to be a sucker to be a good person. In fact, the highest form of goodness requires the strength to say no to the wrong things, so you have the energy to say yes to the right ones. The room feels a little different now, doesn't it? The hum of the fan, the shadows in the corner, they haven't changed, but perhaps your perception of the space you occupy within them has. We spend so much of our lives running on these invisible tracks, believing that our empathy is a bottomless well, only to find ourselves parched and wondering why the ground beneath us is so dry. It is a quiet, haunting realization to discover that the very traits we were taught to cherish, our patience, our willingness to see the best in others, our urge to heal, are the same tools used by the world to dismantle us. The mind is not always your ally. It seeks harmony over truth and safety over justice. It would rather see you suffer in a familiar cage of kindness than face the terrifying, cold wind of standing alone in your own defense. Sometimes, the greatest illusion is believing you were ever fully in control of your generosity. You were following a script written by ancestors who needed you to sacrifice for the tribe, and edited by those who realized they could profit from that sacrifice. As you prepare to return to the world outside this screen, carry this silence with you. Watch your impulses. When you feel that familiar urge to apologize for a boundary you haven't even set yet, or when you find yourself making an excuse for someone who didn't ask for one, stop. Look at the gears turning. Recognize the halo, the debt, and the dissonance for what they are. You are the architect, and it is time you looked at the blueprints. The greatest act of kindness you can perform is often the one you've been denying yourself. The permission to be your own protector.